assignments. This is PLAR History and Geography here at WASA. I'm your teacher, Jonathan. We're entering week number 5 of our term 1B. Again, hopefully everyone's still working on your assignments. The holidays is just around the corner, so again, please really work hard. Try to finish as much as you can before the break happens. Again, if you want to listen and participate to our class right now for PLAR History and Geography, you can simply just call in the Walser Studio, either at your Learning Center or at home, or you can log on to Smart Bridget. Again, my contact information is on your screen. Again, if you have any questions, just call the Wausau office, ask for Jonathan. My email is on there, and my Facebook as well if you want to inbox me. Again, if you have missed any class and you want to review any materials, again, it's on the archive page and it's also posted on my YouTube channel as well. Alrighty, so today, over the next 60 minutes, over the next hour, we will wrap up history of PLAR History and Geography. Yes, we're at the halfway point. We're going to finish up history today. That is the goal. We're going to wrap up lesson number 3. That'll be done in the books. And then next class on Thursday, we should start geography, lesson number 4, and then continue to lesson 4 and lesson number 5 for the rest of this course. Before we do that, I do have some announcements. I am not traveling at the moment until after the holidays. So yes, Barry and myself was supposed to go to Mish. We attended, had plans to go this week, either today or tomorrow, but due to weather and how cold it is and other circumstances going on, we have decided to push back our community visit to Mish after the holidays. So again, I apologize if you're anticipating our arrival, but Barry and myself will not be traveling to Mish until after the holiday break. Okay, we'll still come, have our open house, do what we do, tutor, visit our students in the community, but that will not happen until after the break. Also, another community visit announcement is Big Trout. Doug and myself have booked our flight, have booked our accommodations to Big Trout, and that will be taking place the first week after the holidays. Okay, the first week after the holidays. So that Tuesday and that Wednesday, right back from the holidays. So I believe that's the 10th and the 11th of January. That's when Doug and I are going to Big Trout. So again, everyone in Big Trout, all of our students and friends, community members of Big Trout. Again, I look forward to visiting Big Trout as I have not been there yet. So again, no travel until after the holidays due to weather and other circumstances. So that means that we will not have any class cancellation. I will always be here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays doing our class live with everyone. Again, if you have any questions in regards to the community visit schedule and timing, just give me a shout or just talk to your DC as they know which teacher and which staff are visiting and when. But for myself, again, Mish, Big Trout after the holiday break. So like I said, today we're going to wrap up lesson number 3. We're going to wrap up history. We won't do any review in terms of last class. Again, if you have any questions, yes, we can always review it, but again, you can always check it out on the archive page. Today, we are starting on page 21 in your textbook. And our class title today is called Canada Act and Free Trade. Okay, lesson number 3, we're looking at Canada from the 1980s, 1982 to, in a way, modern present time. Again, we're wrapping up history, looking at some key political, social, cultural, economic events so far. Today's learning goals. Again, a learning goal is what we will be learning, okay, the students and myself. It's the direction we are headed. So today's class learning goals are we are learning about the Canadian Constitution and we're learning about women in Canadian politics. Okay, so these are our two goals for today. Again, we are learning about the Canadian Constitution and we are learning about women in Canadian politics. Again, how women make great strides over time. Success criteria, again, hopefully this is something you will be able to achieve after today's class. I can explain Brian Mulroney impact towards First Nations, and you can say I can explain how Sav, Jean, Clarkson, and Campbell, all these women, broke down barriers for women equality. Okay, so these are our two success criteria for Taylor. Looking at Brian Mulroney, what he implemented, what he wanted to achieve, and what he did and didn't do. And we were looking at some key women in Canadian politics and how they really broke down barriers, challenges towards women equality to achieve women equality, I should say. So again, like I said, we're starting on page 21 in your textbook. So again, if you have it in front of you, uh, feel free to turn to that page, follow along, highlight, make notes, circle. Again, I'm just trying to pick and choose key points from your textbook, summarize it, add some additional content, some background knowledge for you to understand to help with your assignments. So before Canada could establish free trade, they determined that they needed to cut ties with Britain for good. Okay. Yes, we have done it before with other acts, but to do it completely, we need to do something. So that was known as the Canada Act that was referred into your textbook in 1982. This is also known as the Constitution Act, okay, something that I like to refer to as. Okay, so again, the Constitution Act was signed on April 17th, 1982. With the Constitution now in place in the Canada Act, it now gives Canada complete control over its sovereignty and constitution without Britain's permission. Okay, so this is the moment. Some can even argue that this is a defining moment in Canadian history where we now absolutely cut off ties with Britain. We are now our own nation, okay, where we can make our own rules, changes moving forward. Yes, we came into Confederation in 1867, but with the Canada Act in 1982, we are now free from Britain's permissions and interference. Within the Constitution, we also have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Again, we talked about that a few classes ago. Again, all of that fundamental and legal rights included in the Charter is now embedded into the Constitution. All Canadian provinces sign on to the Constitution, the provinces and territories, I should say, sign on to the Constitution. So the Constitution applies to absolutely everyone, all Canadian citizens, everyone here in Canada. But there was one province that did not sign on to the Constitution, and that was Quebec. Even though Quebec did not sign the Constitution, it still applied to them. They just didn't sign on to it. Okay, so that's the Canada Act in 1982, otherwise known as the Constitution Act. Very significant in terms of what we can do as a nation on our own. So again, note the year when it was signed and note its purpose and its reason. So class, if you want to flip the page in your textbook to the next page, it starts talking about Brian Mulroney, Canada's former Prime Minister. in the 1980s. Brian Mulroney, as Prime Minister, he wanted and favored lower taxes. Sound great. And he also wanted less government spending. He wanted to improve relationship with the United States, establish free trade, and wanted to please Quebec. Again, this all sounds great. So again, we can now make free trade with other nations because again, with the Constitution Act, we can now do it without any permission interference from Britain. So again, we want to improve our relationship with our neighbor down south, the United States, and he wanted to please Quebec because Quebec didn't sign the Constitution. Again, it didn't bring a sense of unity as a nation since Quebec did not sign on. So he wanted to fix that and wanted to please Quebec. In terms of Canada in the 1990s, it was a period of recession, unable to reduce government debt, cutbacks, social service, pension, and welfare. So Brian Mulroney introduced something known as the GST tax, the goods and service tax. Again, it's something that we still have today. It's just not called the GST tax anymore. So again, more taxes that Canadians have to pay, which we did not like because Brian Mulroney introduced a brand new tax known as the GST tax. I think it's called now the HST tax. But again, it happened because he cut back on social service, pension, and welfare. So again, more money needed to come from somewhere, and it came out of Canadian citizens' pocket. And eventually, Brian Mulroney resigned in 1993. Sticking with Brian Mulroney, we're gonna link him with free trade. Again, Canada's foreign policy in terms of economics. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, came into place in 1994. It was an agreement where we can trade goods, services, and items back and forth without paying additional taxes. It consisted of us, Canada, United States, and Mexico. We'll talk more about NAFTA as we navigate throughout this course, especially during lesson number 4 when we look at geography. So again, stay tuned for that. We'll look at the pros and cons of NAFTA, whether it was successful or not. Again, you can be the judge of that. Again, some Canadians supported NAFTA and some did not. Again, some businesses started to move away from Canada and started to move to Mexico because in Mexico you can produce your product at a much cheaper rate and pay the workers much cheaper. So again, not so good for Canadian companies as we start to lose work here in Canada. American companies, as you know, Americans are always big and strong and powerful, always want to spread their influences. Their companies start to operate here in Canada because they have a much stronger American dollar. Again, you can see some of that effect today where our Canadian dollar is not the greatest. It hasn't been the greatest for a while now. And with the strong American dollars, again, we start to see a lot of Canadian companies shut down, declare bankruptcy, and more American companies start to establish and open up here in Canada. Again, could be good, could be bad, depending on how you look at it. Again, it all relates to more American influence here in Canada. Okay, a lot of more American influence here in Canada. Again, like I said, we'll talk more about NAFTA and free trade when we looked at lesson 4 in geography. So again, we'll summarize these points again in the next couple of lessons when we start looking at geography. So next we're going to talk about Meech Lake Accord in 1987. Again, this is still on page 22 in your textbook. Again, sticking to the theme of Brian Mulroney and his impact, his contribution here in Canada, and whether it was positive or negative. He, like I said, he wanted to please Quebec. Again, Quebec didn't sign on to the Constitution. Quebec was the only province that did not sign on to the Constitution. So in a way, it created a little hole in our unity, in our united country of Canada, as everyone else signed on to the Constitution, but Quebec. Quebec, again, as we know, just to review, they have a distinct identity, culture. They were, majority of them were French francophones Canadian, where they speak French first compared to English. Again, just a different way of living compared to the majority of Canada. Again, not so much different, but they just wanted to maintain their culture and their identity of being francophones and French-speaking Canadians. So as a result, Quebec wanted to be recognized as a distinct society. Okay, they want to, in a way, declare themselves as different or other compared to everyone else. Elijah Harper. Okay, I believe he was Métis. In other ways, he was just indigenous and First Nation. He Elijah Harper was a Manitoba MP, and he really fought for Aboriginal rights. He heard that Quebec wanted to be declared as a distinct society. Elijah Harper stepped up, voiced his opinion, and said, if Quebec was to be treated as a distinct society, in quotation marks, why can't we, in terms of First Nation, indigenous population? Again, Aboriginals, Indigenous, again, they have their own culture, identity. Again, why can't they be recognized as distinct if Quebec was? So in other words, the Meech Lake Accord was never passed. Okay, so again, the goal of the Meech Lake Accord was to please Quebec. It was supposed to recognize Quebec as a distinct society, but that did not happen because Elijah Harper stepped up and fought for Aboriginal rights, and as a result, the Meech Lake Accord was never signed, and still, Quebec was still not a part of the Constitution. Again, on my screen, I have some points in terms of what the Meech Lake Accord wanted to achieve if it was passed. Again, one, Quebec would be recognized as a distinct society. Two, Quebec would participate in naming Supreme Court judges. Three, Quebec could veto or block any constitutional change. Four, limits were placed on federal spending in Quebec. And five, Quebec would have an increased power in the area of immigration. Again, if the Meech Lake was successful and passed, all these criteria would be in place to benefit Quebec. Again, some of these statements that I just read out can be seen as unfair to the rest of Canada and other groups as well. And as a result, it was never passed. The Charlottetown Accord in 1992. This is not in your textbook. I have added this in because this is just another element that relates to the Meech Lake Accord. The Charlottetown Accord in 1992 was the last attempt by Brian Mulroney to get Quebec to sign on to the Constitution. He didn't give up, even though the Meech Lake Accord failed. He wanted to attempt one more time to get Quebec to sign on to the Constitution. Again, same purpose as the Meech Lake Accord, but it had different statements and recognition that's slightly different in terms of the Meech Lake Accord. So one, the Charlottetown Accord will recognize Quebec as a distinct society. That was still the same. Two, Quebec could opt out of federal compensation and run their own programs. Again, slightly different. 3, Quebec can control development and labor training. And 4, Quebec could have the right to choose 3 Supreme Court judges. Again, slightly different from the Meech Lake Accord, but slightly different. In the end, it came down to the people, the public, where people voted on whether or not the Charlottetown Accord would be passed, and the result was no. 54% voted no, and 46% voted yes. And as a result, Quebec is still not signed on to the Constitution. Yes, Quebec is still part of Canada. There will always will be, but again, they just didn't sign on to the Constitution. So again, just a little more background content in regards to the Charlottetown Accord in 1992. Are there any questions at this point? Again, you can simply shout it out into your microphone if you have one. You can type out your questions if you log onto Smart Bridget. You can take control of my smartboard screen at the top with those buttons at the top and just simply write it out. Again, many ways to interact as well. Our last topic section that we're going to talk about and deal with is Canadian women in politics. Yes, we're going to go back to looking at gender roles, but more specifically, women in politics. Again, if you can recall back to lesson number 1, where we talked about women's role in the early 1900s, again, they were really limited in terms of what they could do. They could not vote, they could not own property, they were held to just domestic duties, being the angel in the house, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children and the family, basically in the private sphere, basically did not really work in the public sphere. That was women in the early 1900s. Yes, we have seen great strides in terms of what women could do due to person case being able to vote in 1917, 1918. They won that right to vote provincially and federally. So again, women had made great stride and progress in terms of what they could do. Again, the temperance movement, Nellie McClung, the person case, uh, women were now recognized as a person. Again, major stride, major improvement in terms of women in terms of equality rights and what they can do. Again, the Charter of Rights and Freedom now applies to everyone, both genders, etc. So again, lots of improvement. But it didn't stop there. Now Canadian women, in terms of politics, now held key roles and positions in politics. And those two roles are Prime Minister and the Governor General. Okay, Prime Minister and the Governor General. So again, women became highly involved in terms of politics now. Before, not so much, even none. In your textbook, starting on page 24, 25, 26, it deals with 4 women and how they really broke down challenges, barriers in terms of what women can do, especially in terms of politics, okay, Canadian politics. We're going to look at 3 Governor General and 1 Prime Minister, Jean Save, Adrienne Clarkson, Michelle Jean, and Kim Campbell. Okay, these are the 4 names that we are going to look at slightly in depth in terms of what they achieved and how they really broke down these barriers. Again, I don't expect the class to know all the details about all these 4 individuals. Again, it's not what we're here to achieve. Just note some. Again, on your next assignment, we'll ask some questions dealing with some of these individuals, these women. But again, just note some. Okay, just note the key points and why they really changed the landscape of Canadian women in politics. But before we look at these individual closely, let's talk about the Governor General and the Prime Minister. What are their roles? Again, this is not in your textbook. You may have wonder, what does the Prime Minister do? Yes, we know who our Prime Minister is, Justin Trudeau, the Liberal Party, but what is his role? He has a Governor General. What does he do? What does she do? Okay, so look at some of these closely, and we can maybe perhaps decipher which position is more important. So let's look at the Governor General and the role. Acts as the Queen Representative in Canada, acts as the head of state, gives royal assent to pass bills in the House of Commons. The Governor General signs on state documents. He or she reads out the throne speech, appoint court judges, is often selected by the Prime Minister, and is often in office for usually for 5 years. After that term, a new Governor General is appointed or selected by the Prime Minister. So again, pretty significant in terms of what they can do. Again, appoint judges, sign on state documents, give permission to pass on bills in the House of Commons, represent the Queen when the Queen visits Canada, and recognized as the head of the state. Again, pretty significant. The role of the Prime Minister. Well, so what does Justin Trudeau do every day? Well, the Prime Minister is the head of the government in Canada, okay, at the very top. He or she provides the leadership and the direction for the government. The Prime Minister selects members of the cabinets, appoints executive members, judges, and other key figures, and can explain policies and programs created. Again, pretty significant. You can argue that the government general role is more important than the prime minister, as the governor general does more, whereas the prime minister just can be able to explain what he or she does or changes that they do. So again, policies and program created. Alright, so now we're going to look at these 4 Canadian women figures. Again, Jean Save was the 23rd Governor General here in Canada. She was the first ever women Governor General of Canada in 1984. Again, first woman appointed Speaker of the House of Commons. She was the first one. Again, before this, we never had a woman in this position. She really focused on youth and world peace. So again, before all this, she worked as a CBC journalist for 20 years, but she is the first woman to be Governor General and a Speaker in the House of Commons. Again, very significant. Next person, Adrienne Clarkson. Again, also a Governor General of Canada, a former Governor General of Canada in 1999. She was born in Hong Kong, came to Canada as a refugee. Before all this, she worked for CBC as a host and a writer, but she was recognized as the first person of a visible minority to be Governor General. Okay, she was not the first woman to be Governor General, but she was the first person or woman of a visible minority to be Governor General. Again, really broke down barriers for women of color, of extent, very significant. Again, she really focused on military, the northern communities, and she also visited Aboriginal communities as well. So good work for her. She did lots, but again, she was the first person of a visible minority to be Governor General of Canada. Michelle Jean, again, also another Canadian woman Governor General of Canada in 2005, pretty recent. Again, just another example of another woman in this in this position of power. She was born in Haiti and eventually came to Canada. And as position, she really emphasized on issue of youth, again, Aboriginal Canadians, military arts, fighting violence against women. So again, a lot of good things that she did as well. And lastly, Kim Campbell. Who is Kim Campbell? Well, she was Canada's first woman to be prime minister. Okay, first woman to be prime minister. She wasn't there for long. She basically just took over for Brian Mulroney when he stepped down, retired from office in 1993. Obviously, they were associated with the same political party. She was next in line if that happened. Obviously, it did. So Kim Campbell stepped up and became Canada's first women prime minister. Like I said, she wasn't there for long. She improved the criminal code, firearms, sexual assault laws, but she really focused on debt than jobs. Okay, she focused on debt than jobs, and she refused to discuss social programs. Again, not very popular in terms of her decision. She didn't really reflect Canadians in terms of helping them out, and as a result, in the next political federal election, she lost in a vote to be prime minister again. So again, she wasn't really in office very that long. Hence why we may not really recognize her name, what did she achieve, as she was there just a short period of time, and all that. So again, Kim Campbell, significant as she was the first woman to be prime minister in Canada. Pretty key. Some indigenous content that we're going to plug in since the 1980s to present day. Well, an example was the Orca crisis in the 1990 in southern Ontario. There was an infringement upon expanding a golf course on First Nation land that belonged to the Mohawk community. Again, lots of tension that was captured on the media. Huge standoff in terms of whether or not they could expand the golf course in terms of interfering with First Nation land and the land claims. Again, it was huge on the media, lots of barriers, really, really ugly. Again, that was the Orca crisis in the 1990s. In terms of Aboriginal voice, a lot more public awareness of residential school situations. Again, even to this day, we have still made great progress and strides in regards to residential school situations. Again, a lot more people know about it. I have gained more knowledge, read more sources, books about residential school. So again, I think the word is being out there. But the government took another 20 years before they even apologized. Uh, Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper in 2008 finally formally publicly apologized to the situation about residential school, where he says, and I quote, "I stand before you to offer my apologies to former students of Indian residential schools," end quote. Again, Stephen Harper said that in 2008. So again, it just demonstrates and shows great progress and great strides in how First Nation situations are now being recognized more and things are taken into account. Again, dealing with Indigenous identity today compared to what it was when we first started. In 1867, when Canada came into Confederation, European Canadians were confident that Aboriginal people would become absorbed into mainstream Euro-Canadian society. It took all this year, almost 150 years, give or take, and this has not happened. The key was adaptability. That was the key to survival. Okay, they were able to adapt, but First Nations in the 20th century, or even today, 21st century, learn how to be a part of Canadian society without compromising their identity. Again, they were able to adapt, but still maintain the identity, still know where they came from, their culture, their background, their traditions, and their language and their land. They always knew where they came from and who they were. And because it is with a new voice, they are now healing. They are now telling their story to the rest of Canadians, where we are starting to learn from our local elders about their history, the traditions, and what is going on in our communities. So again, lots of great strides, huge improvement from the very, very start. Again, the progress has not stopped. We have not achieved what we wanted, but again, we're making small steps in the right direction. We still have a long ways to go in terms of bridging the gap between First Nations and non-First Nations, but we are getting there. We are getting there. We are creating discussions. We are creating talk and a lot of awareness. So let's get to assignment number 8 in your workbook. Again, note students, you have to complete all assignments or at least attempt all questions on all your assignments before I can give you the green light so that you can write your tests for PLAR history or geography. Okay, the test is what really counts, so just keep that in mind. Your assignments are like practice so that I can see that you're making progress, show understanding, and by completing all questions on your assignments, you should have no difficulties on your tests. Okay, so again, just keep that in mind, but you still need to do it. Okay. Assignment number 8, 16 marks. Question 1, what was the Canada Act and when was it signed? Okay. What did it do for Canada? When was it signed? What was the Canada Act? What was the Constitution Act? Again, details, sentences to be successful. Question 2. Okay. You cannot find the answer for question 2 in your textbook, no matter how hard you tried. Oh, look, you cannot even Google this answer. Okay. So this is important. It's an opinion-based question where there's technically no right or wrong answer, as long as you back up the reason as to why or why not. So question 2, do you think North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico will ever include other countries in their free trade agreement? Why or why not? Or yes or no? Okay, so what do you think? So we have Canada, United States, and Mexico. Should we add another country? Should we add a fourth country to that agreement? Should we add a fifth, sixth, seventh country in terms of that free trade agreement? Again, why or why not? Think about it. Use your critical thinking skills. Think outside the box. Okay, but back up your answer with supporting facts, details, and what you think. Again, What do you think? Not what I think, but what do you think? Okay. I love these questions because again, there's no right or wrong answer. It just demonstrates your thinking. Again, you'll see more of those questions, especially when you do your tests. So again, keep that in mind. It's not just always about the content, facts, and details. But again, it's all about establishing your thinking skills so that you can better articulate, improve and practice your reading and writing skills. Last question, you'll see a little chart. It's out 10 marks. It asks about Canadian political figures. Again, prime ministers and governor general. We have Mackenzie King, Pierre Trudeau, Brian Mulroney, Gene South, and Adrienne Clarkson. Your job here is to give your thought, again, your opinion. What do you think about this person and their place in Canadian history with regards to details provided in this course? So again, we have learned and touched bases on all of these individuals, King, Trudeau, Mulroney, Saab, and Clarkson. What do you think about them? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you dislike them? Why or why not? What do you think? Did they help Canadian society? Did they help people? Did they not help people? What did they achieve? What did they not achieve? What did they accomplish? What were their historical significance? Okay, what do you think? Okay, so again, go through these names. Your job is to give your thought and provide an example from the course material to support your thinking. So you can say that, oh, I do not like Brian Mulroney because he created the GST tax. Because now Canadians have to pay more money. Okay, that will give you 2 out of 2 marks because the state your reason and you backed it up. Or you can say that, oh, I really admire Adrienne Clarkson achievement. She was the first female woman of a visible minority to be Governor General of Canada. Okay, something on those lines. Again, give your thought, provide details. Okay, so again, assignment 8 has to do a lot with critical thinking and where you stand in terms of your thoughts. Okay, are there any questions? If you do, you know where to find me. So that pretty much wraps up the first